When I was 19, my sister looked me in the eye and said I was an embarrassment to the family. She said it softly, but it landed like a blade. A week later, the locks on the front door were changed. My mother left a bag of my clothes on the porch. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. They said I was reckless, emotional, unfit. But the truth, I just couldn't stay quiet about what they did. So I disappeared. For 15 years, I vanished, changed my name, cut my hair, erased every trace of who I was. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew that if they ever saw me rise, they'd find a way to bury me again. Then, one afternoon, I walked into a courtroom where my sister was on trial. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The judge paused, squinted toward the back, and asked, "Wait, is that Camille Reyes? The governor?" Every head whipped around. My sister's mouth fell open. And in that suspended moment, all the years I spent buried under their silence cracked open into something else. They used to call me a failure. But now, the only thing louder than their silence was the sound of the world finally seeing me. Before I tell you everything, can you do something simple? Drop a hi in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far this story reaches. It reminds me I'm not alone. And if my voice hits something true in you, hit subscribe. I promise, this isn't the last chapter. You'll want to hear. Thank you. Now, let me take you back. The air in San Antonio was thick with heat. Inside the Reyes home, it was thicker with expectation. They were all gathered around the dining table, polished wood reflecting the soft chandelier glow above. Sunday dinner, a tradition Manuel Reyes upheld with military precision. At the head sat Manuel himself, retired police chief, patriarch, commander of all things honorable. He raised a glass to Isabella, his firstborn, as her image flashed across the muted TV screen behind him. "That's my girl," he said proudly, district attorney for Bexar County, now featured on CNN, a real Reyes. At the far end of the table, I sat, fork poised over my plate, eyes cast down. No one looked at me. No one asked how my graduation went. I'd walked the stage the week before, degree in humanities, not law, not pre-med. I hadn't even told them the date. I knew they wouldn't come. I was always the strange one. Sketchbooks instead of legal pads, Rilke and Simone Weil in my backpack. I painted at dawn, read philosophy in parks, sat quietly through meals like a distant echo of someone who used to matter. I was 23. Brilliant, yes, but in ways they never tried to understand. Then came the storm. It started with a ping, a text from a friend, then another, then a voicemail I didn't even want to hear. By the time I opened my laptop, it was everywhere. A private video, taken during spring break, stolen, uploaded, shared, my face, my body, my voice. The one behind it? My ex. Bitter. Vengeful. I hadn't even known he still had it. I didn't have time to cry before my world collapsed. Isabella found it first. That much I only learned later. She sent it straight to Manuel with a single line. "You need to act before this gets worse." Not to protect me, to protect the family name. Dinner that night never happened. Manuel stormed into my room, fury curling off him like smoke. "You think we raised you for this? For the world to see you like a damn—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. "I didn't post it," I choked out. "I was the one violated." "You violated the name Reyes," he snapped, tossing my university diploma onto the bed like a bill he refused to pay. "You want to live like trash? Then do it without my name, my roof, my money." My mother, Teresa, stood at the doorway. Her rosary wound tightly around her fingers. She said nothing, wouldn't even meet my eyes. I turned to Isabella, maybe hoping for something, anything, but she just stood still. Hands folded, gaze cold, not even a blink. I packed in silence, a few clothes, my sketchbooks, journals, the red backpack I'd carried since freshman year. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, slicing the room into shadows. When I stepped into the living room, Manuel was waiting. He placed my bank card on the table. Don't call, don't write. My mother peeked from behind the curtain as I stepped out into the sweltering dusk. She didn't wave, didn't speak, just watched. The first week I slept in my friend's car. By day 7, her kindness wore thin. I boarded a Greyhound heading north. Denver, maybe, or just somewhere quieter. Somewhere no one would care who I used to be. On the second night of that journey, beneath an overpass just outside Santa Fe, I did something small and final. I took out an old leather-bound notebook, the one with family birthdays, recipes, little notes my mom used to tuck in my lunchbox, and I burned it. Page by page, I fed each memory to the flame. My hands steady, my heart hollow. The fire was soft, the night still. When it was over, I stared into the orange glow, then turned to the rearview mirror of the bus idling behind me. I saw my reflection, tired, betrayed, burning, and I whispered to the dark, "I've got nothing left to lose, so I'll start with what's left of me." Denver was gray that winter. Cold crept through clothes, through skin, through whatever. Fragments of hope I still carried. I rented a room in a rundown apartment building where the walls coughed every sound into your bones. The paint peeled. The sinks were rust-stained. Heat was a suggestion, not a guarantee. My room was barely wide enough for a mattress, a folding table, and one cracked mirror. But it was mine. I worked constantly. Mornings, I served pancakes at a diner off Colfax Avenue. Memorized names, smiled on cue, forgot every interaction the moment I clocked out. Afternoons, I scrubbed a medical clinic's floors still sticky with childhood coughs and aging hopes. Evenings, I typed data at a logistics firm that didn't know my last name. And nights? When the silence wrapped itself around me, when loneliness pressed against my ribs, I wrote. Not full words, fragments, sentences in a secret code I'd invented as a child. A language only I could understand. A way to bleed without leaving stains. I painted too, not often. Paint was expensive. But one night, after a brutal shift, I dipped an old toothbrush in dollar store acrylics and created something strange and aching. A body collapsing into its own shadow. I hung it in the corner behind the curtain. No one ever asked about it. That felt right. Then came the scissors. One morning, without warning, I stood in the bathroom and cut my hair. The strands fell into the sink like dead petals. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a breakdown. It was a decision. A shedding. I registered a new name at the local job board, Cam R. Just enough to disappear. Just enough to start over. One night at the clinic, during a graveyard shift, I heard shouting in Spanish. I stepped into the hallway and saw a woman, small, terrified, holding a child as an officer hovered over her with a stack of papers. "Firma aquí," the officer barked. "It's already processed. Just sign." She didn't understand, or maybe she did, but fear froze her. My heart thundered. "She's not signing that," I said, stepping forward. My voice was sharper than I expected. The officer turned, scowling. "Who the hell are you?" "She's not signing," I repeated. "Your software's outdated. These papers are invalid." It was a lie, but it worked. He grumbled, left. The woman cried, quietly, into her daughter's jacket. Later that week, I got called into a small office. I thought I was being fired. Instead, I met Rafael Delgado, director of Procto Libe, a nonprofit that helped undocumented immigrants. You know, he said, leaning across the desk. Most people don't do what you did. I know, I replied. Most people still have something to lose. He smiled. Come work for us, he said. Not as a cleaner. So I started again, bottom of the ladder. I fetched coffee, translated documents, ran errands. But I watched. I listened. I learned. I began drafting outreach plans, balancing budgets, writing proposals. At night, I studied immigration law online. Sat in on city council meetings just to understand the language of power. I never said the word home, not out loud. But one day, after helping a family of 4 secure emergency housing after fleeing cartel violence, a young intern asked me, "Why do you do this?" I paused. Didn't even need to think. I don't have a family to go back to, I said. So I'm building a place where I might belong. And somehow, in those quiet corners, between doing good and staying invisible, I began to breathe again. 3 years after I tore a deportation order from a frightened mother's hands, I stood in a wood-paneled city hall chamber, speaking with a voice so calm it carried like thunder. People knew me now. Not loudly, but solidly. I had earned a seat on the Immigration Policy Advisory Council. No motorcade, no glamour, but real power, the kind that shifts laws before anyone notices they've moved. That day, a conservative councilman, jaw clenched, tie starched, argued for increased ICE cooperation at Denver shelters. I let him finish, then leaned forward, my voice steady as stone. If the law refuses to grow with justice, I said, then justice stops being lawful and starts being ornamental. The room went still. A few people clapped. The councilman said, nothing. Afterward, a young journalist approached me in the hallway. We'd love to do a piece on you, he said. Local leader, immigrant advocate, the face of change. I blinked. Something twisted in my stomach. Only if you don't. Use my full name, I said. No headshot? He asked, confused. You can call me C. Reese, I told him politely. Why the secrecy? I smiled, but my eyes didn't. Because I've already been seen in all the wrong ways. That night, in my small apartment, not the crumbling one I started in, but still modest, I lit a candle. I did this every night, always in front of the same photo, an old family portrait. Except, I'd scraped my face off with a coin. What was left was a ghostly blur where my smile used to be. I whispered the same words I'd whispered for years. Be remembered for what you do, not what they called you. Some nights I wondered, does my mother still keep a photo of me? Has my father ever told anyone I'm alive? I didn't check, didn't Google. The distance was intentional. Healing, I'd learned, isn't always forward motion. Sometimes it's building walls tall enough so you can grow wild inside them. One day, Marion, a colleague at Procto Libe, leaned across her desk and asked gently, "You ever think about letting people know who you really are?" She was older, black, with a voice like Patience and a spine made of decades in city government. I shrugged. They know who I am. I mean, your past. I shook my head, soft but certain. I'm not hiding. I'm just not ready to be seen by people who used to look right through me. That was the truth. I didn't fear being found. I feared being misunderstood, becoming the story instead of the voice. But progress has a way of chasing the people who try to move silently. A few weeks later, I stood behind a modest podium in a public park. Nothing fancy, no banners, maybe 70 people, tops. I announced I was running for the Colorado State House of Representatives. As an independent, no party lines. I'm not here to represent a party, I said. I'm here to represent the people who are never invited to the table, but who carry it on their backs every day. I didn't talk about my past. I didn't show glossy family photos. No campaign video, no headshot, just a slogan, "Let the work speak first." And with that, I stepped into a different kind of fight. Not just for others, but for myself. The right to rebuild, to rise, to not ask permission. The headlines were small at first, then they weren't. One morning, scrolling past the usual updates, I stopped cold. District Attorney under investigation for evidence tampering. The name, below the headline, hit like a memory I hadn't dared touch in years. Isabella Reyes. I hadn't said her name out loud in over a decade. Hadn't allowed it to live in my mouth. But there it was. Bold, unavoidable. She'd been accused of manipulating evidence in an immigration trial. A mother from Honduras facing deportation. The case had been rushed, mishandled, and now exposed. Activists called it a betrayal of justice. Her defenders? A witch hunt. The stakes were high, possible disbarment, criminal charges, even jail. It felt like hearing a distant explosion, one that shook your chest but left your body still. My press team moved quickly. "We recommend you stay neutral," one advisor said. "You're a sitting governor," another reminded me. "This isn't your fight." But it was. Not because I wanted to defend her. God, no. But because there were too many ghosts in that courtroom, and one of them had my face. I booked a flight to San Antonio. No press announcement. No security detail. Not even a staff member knew. I entered the courthouse through a side door, dressed in black slacks, a plain coat, sunglasses. I sat in the last row. The shadows. The courtroom felt cold, clinical. Lawyers shuffled paper. Reporters whispered into tiny microphones. Isabella sat at the front, impeccable as always. Posture straight, lips tight, every hair in place. But her hands were trembling. Then Judge Audrey Jameson entered. I knew her. We'd spoken briefly at a national governor's conference 2 years back. A commanding black woman with a razor intellect and zero tolerance for performative bullshit. She took her seat behind the bench, scanning the gallery. Her eyes landed on me. A pause, a double take. Then, wait, is that Camille Reyes, the governor? Silence collapsed into static. Heads turned, cameras swung, phones lit up. Gasps. Isabella's head jerked toward the gallery. Her eyes locked on mine. Eyes that once rolled with disdain, now wide with disbelief. Teresa Reyes, my mother, sat stiffly beside her. Pale. Her hand rose to her chest, whispering, something between a prayer and a curse. Manuel Reyes leaned forward, squinting, like he was trying to decide whether the ghost of a disowned daughter had come back in flesh and power. I didn't flinch. I didn't wave. I just sat there. Still. Spine straight, because my presence was enough. Judge Jameson cleared her throat, composed herself, and the proceedings resumed. But the air never quite settled after that. Reporters stole glances. Photographers clicked, relentless. A few tried to move closer before a bailiff blocked them. Off. I ignored it all. I hadn't come to interfere, not to speak, not even to comfort. I had come to witness. I stayed until adjournment, then slipped out the same way I came. No one followed. By the time I reached my hotel, my phone was a storm. Missed calls, voicemails, pings from news outlets I hadn't heard from in years. My name was trending. My face was everywhere. But for once, it wasn't scandal or shame that brought me there. It was presence. I sat by the window that night, watching the lights of a city I used to call home. My reflection in the glass didn't look like a shadow anymore. It looked heavier, real, seen. Camille Reyes had come back, not as a daughter, not as a sister, but as a reckoning. It didn't even take 24 hours. My name, again, everywhere. Only this time it cracked open a vault no one had touched in 15 years. Every outlet had its own spin. Colorado governor's secret past estranged sister of indicted prosecutor. From scandal to Senate, the Camille Reyes redemption arc, the forgotten Reyes, or the real star all along. Then came the real storm. Someone found it, the video. Grainy, pixelated, fuzzy edges, but unmistakable. Me, 23. A spring break rental, a boy with a phone and too much ego, and the world watching. Talk shows pounced. One even interviewed my ex. He sat under studio lights, smiling sheepishly. "We were young," he said. "She knew I had the footage. I didn't think it would go this far." I watched that segment alone in my office. Hands still, face unreadable. I didn't flinch, didn't reach for damage control, didn't hide, because I was done running. My staff scrambled. Should we issue a statement? Should we threaten legal action? Should we shut it all down? I said no, just whispered, "Let them look. I've survived being seen before." Then the phone rang. His name still lived in my contacts, though I'd never meant to keep it. Manuel Reyes. His voice hadn't changed. Still sharp, still full of command, like I was 16 again and had come home wearing lipstick. "You're using our name," he snapped, "dragging our legacy through the mud for attention." I leaned back in my chair, fingers tapping the edge of my desk. "I've carried that name longer than you ever carried." "Me," I said evenly. "I didn't ask to be a Reyes. I stayed one to remind myself who not to become." Click. He hung up. That night, Teresa Reyes was rushed to the hospital. Blood pressure spike. I found out through a quiet call from a cousin I hadn't heard from in years. Against every instinct in my body, I booked a red-eye flight. I entered the hospital without announcement. No aides, no photographers, just me. She looked so small. Not the woman who used to cross herself before every meal. Not the one who told me to smile more, speak less. Just a tired body in a gown. Hands trembling beneath a thin blanket. Our eyes met. "Camille," she whispered, voice brittle, like glass ready to shatter. I didn't move. "If what they say is true," she said, words halting, "then I've spent years not seeing you." Tears welled in her eyes. But I didn't cry. I sat beside her, took her hand, gently, held it in silence. Not as a daughter seeking forgiveness, not as someone offering it, just as myself. I didn't say "I forgive you." That would have been too neat, too easy. Because healing, I'd learned, doesn't always come with a ceremony. Sometimes it slips in quietly, like light under a closed door. When Teresa drifted into sleep, I pulled a small canvas from my bag. A painting I'd done months ago. A woman standing in the desert. Her silhouette stretched long behind her, disproportionate and strange. I left it on the bedside table. The title was simple, Witness. I walked out without leaving a note. Back in Colorado, the media frenzy hadn't calmed. Journalists swarmed outside my office. Editorials dissected my past. Camera crews camped near my home. I didn't give interviews. I didn't post statements. I didn't retreat. At the next cabinet meeting, I walked in like I always did. My staff was tense. The room heavy. I stepped to the podium. "I won't rewrite the past," I said. My voice didn't shake. "But I will decide how it gets used from here on out." Then I opened the meeting. No one asked questions. That silence? It was earned. It was mine. Then came the indictment. Every network carried it. Isabella Reyes, once Texas's golden prosecutor, now charged with tampering evidence in an immigration case. The same case that had unraveled everything. Legal circles that once praised her cut ties, quiet and fast, like rats fleeing a ship. Whispers turned to press releases. Former colleagues spoke in carefully worded disappointment. A betrayal of public trust. Her name, once said with pride, now dragged behind every sentence like shame with a pulse. I watched from Colorado, stone-faced. Then my phone buzzed. Teresa. I stared at the name for a long time before I answered. Her voice trembled like dry leaves in the wind. Mija, she cried. Please, just come home, just once, for dinner. I didn't answer. Not then. That night, another message arrived. Manuel. Not a call. Not a voicemail. Just a text. We need to talk. 15 years of silence. 15 years of pretending I didn't exist. And suddenly, they remembered my number. Against everything I believed I'd learned to resist, I said yes. That Friday, I arrived at the Reyes house just before sundown. The porch looked smaller, like time had shrunk it. Inside, the furniture gleamed, lemon oil in the air, nervous energy in every corner. They were all there. Teresa opened the door. Her smile trembled. Mascara already smudged. Manuel stood behind her, ironed shirt, stiff posture. Isabella sat at the far end of the table, head bowed, fingers folding and unfolding a napkin. My old seat was still there. Same chair, but reupholstered. New leather, tight stitches, a shiny coat over a splintered frame. Dinner was elaborate. Enchiladas rojo, fresh tortillas. Wine no one touched. Teresa tried to fill the silence. Remember when you used to draw on the napkins? She asked, voice bright like a cracked bulb. Manuel chimed in. Your campaign posters were very professional. I read one of your speeches. Quite impressive. I said nothing, just listened, watched, measured. Eventually, Isabella spoke, voice low. I know I messed up, she said. I never thought it would go this far. There it was. Then came the ask. Teresa leaned in, voice delicate. We were thinking. She reached for my hand but stopped just short. Maybe you could say a few words to the federal prosecutor. Nothing formal, just a small recommendation. For family. I looked around the table. At my mother, tears clinging to hope like a child with a threadbare blanket. At my father, eyes sharp, words soft, but only at the surface. At Isabella, once the architect of my exile, now reduced to quiet desperation. I set my fork down. The sound echoed like a gavel. If I weren't the governor, I asked, calm and even, would I still be your blood? No one answered. Silence thickened. I stood. The chair squeaked. The air lifted. I kept your name, I said softly. But I built my life without you in it. And then I walked to the door. Teresa called after me. Camille, please. But I didn't look back. The air outside was cool, clear, and for the first time, I didn't carry the weight of that house with me. Only my own. The text came at 3:12 a.m. Then another, and another, a flood of images, screenshots, grainy stills from the old video, private emails from my early 20s, a photo of me, crying, outside a Denver shelter, year 1, no caption. No sender, just history thrown like knives. I stared at the screen in the dark, my pulse steady, not fear, just calculation. By 9 a.m., my communications director knocked on my door. Her face pale, the way people look when something precious is about to break. We've got something, she said, sliding a tablet across my desk. There it was. A blog post already spreading like wildfire. The real Camille. Leaked files from the governor's past. I didn't flinch. At noon, A discreet call came in. An old friend, now at the Justice Department. "You didn't hear it from me?" they said, voice low. "But your father's asking questions, background vetting, stirring dust." I closed my eyes, just for a beat, then opened them with a clarity that felt like glass. This wasn't concern. It was a warning. Or worse, a soft threat. That evening, instead of waiting for the storm to reach me, I walked straight into it. The next morning, I stood at a podium in Denver. No flags behind me, no security at my shoulders, just a wall of drawings from immigrant children I'd helped, and one stark white spotlight. I wore a crisp white blazer, no jewelry, hair tucked behind my ears. A woman unarmed, but untouchable. "We all know how power works," I began. "It doesn't always arrive as violence or law. Sometimes it whispers. Her father is well connected. She should stay quiet. Remember who raised her. Remember who could unraise her. Sometimes," I said, "power comes as family dinners, as questions disguised as love, as pressure dressed up as legacy." I paused. The room was breathless. "Well, this bill is for anyone who's ever had their past used against them by the people who were supposed to protect them." I introduced the Justice Witness Protection Bill, a proposal to criminalize attempts to manipulate whistleblowers, public officials, or advocates through reputation threats, familial pressure, or personal history. It was bold, personal, and unmistakably aimed. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. Every lawmaker knew, every news anchor, every member of the Reyes family. And this time, the media didn't turn against me. They stood behind me. Editorials called the bill long overdue. Op-eds praised the poise. Headlines shifted tone. Governor. Reyes redefines political armor. She fought her family. Now she fights for the silenced from San Antonio? Nothing. No texts, no calls. Just silence. But not the kind that crushed me anymore. The kind I owned. Later that week, I walked the streets of Denver alone. No reporters, no cameras. Just a woman in a navy coat, coffee in hand, crossing 14th and Bannock under soft fall light. And for once, no one stopped me. No one stared. And I smiled. I like it this way, I thought. Because I don't need to be remembered to keep doing what no one else dares to. Then came the knock. "Ma'am," my assistant said, poking her head in, "Isabella Reyes is in the lobby." I looked up from my notes. "Did she make an appointment?" "No, she just asked to see you, alone." I paused, then nodded. "Send her in." I cleared the desk, left a single glass of water, no cameras, no staff, no security. When Isabella entered, she looked nothing like the woman I'd once known. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes, a plain blouse, jeans, and shoulders that didn't know how to hold themselves up. I didn't speak. The silence grew heavy between us, an old silence, familiar, long buried. She sat down across from me. "I didn't know how to start," she said quietly. "But I know I ruined what we could have had, as sisters, before I even realized I was jealous of you." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "I don't want to go to prison, but I'm not here to ask you to fix it." She took a breath. "I just wanted to tell the truth. I stepped on you to climb higher, and now I look up, and you're somewhere I can't even see the ceiling of." I watched her, calm, unreadable. "You didn't destroy me, Isabella," I said. "You just forgot I existed. And when someone is forgotten long enough," I leaned forward, voice steady, "they remember how to become unforgettable." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Mom still thinks you'll save me," she whispered. I turned my head slightly, eyes drifting to the tall windows behind her. The city outside glowed gold with late afternoon. "I'm not here to save anyone," I said. "I saved myself, so no one could drown me again." Isabella nodded. Slowly, her voice softened, just above a whisper. "Thank you for not hating me more than I deserve." I didn't reply. There was no hug, no final embrace, just an honest silence between two women who once shared a room, a bloodline, and years of invisible damage. As she stood to leave, her hand brushed the edge of my desk. There, half hidden beneath a folder, was a piece of paper, an unsigned letter, a plea for clemency. One I had written and burned that very morning, after remembering a different kind of call from 15 years ago. One where a sister had whispered to our father, "She's the one in the video." The door clicked shut behind her. I sat back down, opened the next draft of my judicial reform package, and began to write again. Some legacies, I thought, can't be rewritten, but they can end with you. The conference wasn't grand, no spotlight. No big screens, no political theater, just a room. Plain walls, folded chairs, name tags that peeled at the corners. But the air buzzed with something heavy, something true. It was a statewide gathering on family justice reform. Panels filled with people who had exposed the kinds of truths no one once aired: corruption, abuse, betrayal. Not by strangers, by fathers, husbands, bosses, blood. Not stories of rebellion, but of survival. Of being punished not for lying, but for telling the truth. Too close to home. Backstage, I stood still as the final video played. A montage of blurred faces, digitally disguised voices. Captions that read like open wounds. My father called it shame. I called it truth. She told me to stay silent. I told the court instead. I was loyal, until loyalty started to kill me. Then the moderator stepped to the mic. "Please, welcome Governor Camille Reyes, advocate, reformer, daughter." I walked on stage, no fanfare, no applause, just that quiet hum of attention that means they're ready to hear you now. "I was once called a disgrace," I began. "Then I was erased. Then I was threatened. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Not with guns, not with violence, with memories." I looked out into the crowd. No slogans, no speechwriter tricks, just me. "I'm not here to make anyone apologize to me," I said. "I'm here so that if I ever have children, if any of us do, they'll know that loving their truth doesn't mean betraying their bloodline." I scanned the crowd, and then I saw her. Teresa, my mother, second row, older, smaller, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She didn't speak, but the tears tracked silently down her face. Farther back, almost hidden in the dim, sat Manuel. No badge, no pressed suit, just a man in a plain shirt, arms crossed like he was still trying to shield himself with a posture that no longer worked. Isabella wasn't there. But in the front row, one empty seat held a printed sign, reserved for who she once hoped to be. I smiled, quietly. Then came the shift. "I'd like to announce a new policy," I said. "It's called the Public Kinship Act, or what I call the Family Transparency Clause. Under the new legislation, public employees would be allowed to declare familial relationships that posed a conflict of interest, without fear of retaliation, demotion, or being branded disloyal. It was a way to name the wound, to protect whistleblowers not just from strangers, but from those who shared their last name. Because silence, I said, should not be the price of belonging." The room didn't explode in applause. It inhaled, held its breath, then let it go. The speech streamed live across the country. Some cried, some applauded, some said it was too personal for politics. But for once, No one called me the disgraced sister of a disgraced prosecutor. Not anymore. After I stepped off stage, no flowers waited, no thunder, just that quiet, grounded sense that I had pulled something painful out of the earth and turned it into a seed. I didn't need to erase the name Reyes. I had simply rewritten what it meant. 6 months later, I walked into a small community center in South Denver. No press, no aides, no podium, just 40 folding chairs and a few locals who thought they were attending a leadership panel. I wore jeans, a long gray cardigan, no makeup. I helped move chairs, poured myself coffee, smiled like I belonged there. Because, in many ways, I did. When it was time to speak, I stepped forward. No title, no graphic, just 3 words in chalk behind me. Ruthless. Leadership. People leaned in. "I get asked all the time," I began. "How did you make it without your family's support?" A pause. A small smile. "I didn't make it. I just stopped waiting for them." Laughter. Soft, but real. "We don't choose our blood," I said, "but we do get to choose what legacy we carry forward. And maybe more importantly, which ones we lay down." A woman raised her hand. Mid-50s, silver in her hair, years in her shoulders. "What if," she asked, "they come back different?" Her voice cracked a little. "What if they've changed?" I tilted my head, considered it. "I'll let them tell their story," I said. "But I've already told mine. And I'm not rewriting it." Silence again. Not awkward, resonant. That was when I saw him. Manuel. At the very back of the room. Next to the wall. No suit, no badge. Just an old man watching his daughter speak from a place he'd never helped her reach. Our eyes met. Not defiant, not pleading. Just clear. When the event ended, people clapped. Not out of obligation, but recognition. As the room emptied, Manuel walked forward, quietly. No one noticed. No cameras turned. He waited his turn, then stepped to the mic. "I never understood my daughter," he said. A long breath. "But today I realized, maybe I don't have. Maybe all I need to do is admit, she did what I never could. I see her now." No apology. No explanation. Just that. I didn't cry, didn't rush to embrace him. I just bowed my head. A gesture full of peace, but not surrender. Outside, the first flakes of snow were falling. Children ran across the frozen park, chasing each other, through the playground. I stepped out into the hush of early winter. Didn't look back, didn't wave, just walked, alone, but not lonely. I had once lived just to be seen. Now, I had finally learned to see myself. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones no one sees, the ones fought in the quiet, against the weight of memory, against the gravity of blood, against the part of you that still waits for someone to say, "I'm sorry we made you invisible." But healing isn't about rewriting what's been done. It's about refusing to carry it any further. We don't choose where we come from, but we do choose where we stand. And sometimes, standing alone is the beginning of something unbreakable. If this story moved you, tell me. I'd love to hear what stayed with you in the comments. If you want to walk this road with me again, subscribe. Stay close, because we're not done yet. Not even close. Thank you for listening.